Take it home where you spread it around. If you don't like who's in there, vote them out. That's what election day is all about. And the biggest gun we got is called the ballot box. If you don't like who's in there, vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. And when they're gone, we'll sing and dance and shout. And she'll bring some new ones in, and they will start the show again. And if you don't like who's in there, vote them out. It's a bunch of clowns you voted in. Election day is coming around again. And if you don't like it now, you can change it anyhow. And if you don't like who's in there, vote them out. 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 And when they're gone, we'll sing and dance and shout. We'll start the show again and bring some new ones in. And if you don't like who's in there, vote them out. Vote them out. Vote them out. And when we're done, we'll sing and dance and shout. Then we'll bring some new ones in, and we'll start the show again. But if you don't like who's in there, vote them out. And if you don't like who's in there, vote them out. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Texas. Thank you, Beto. All the way, buddy. We love y'all. Thank you.
From WBRNRadio and on the Boston Red Network, this is a special production, the 2018 debate series. This particular one focuses on the state of Georgia, the gubernatorial debate there between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. They faced off on the 23rd of October 2018 at the public TV station there in Atlanta, Georgia. And what follows us will be an edited version of that particular debate in Georgia. But firstly, let's go to Jim Galloway. He's a columnist for the Atlanta Constitution paper that played a very important part in the desegregation of the South. In fact, they had bomb threats, something like what we saw recently. The partials sent through the mail. They now have the suspect DNA fingerprints. He'd been a bad actor for a very long time out of Florida. And we'll get to him at the last of this, but let's firstly get this done. This was on the 23rd. Also, the Political Insider, the column is there. Last Monday, the Democratic campaign of Stacey Abrams confirmed that as Farbrand at Spelman College, where she went, the future candidate for governor participated in a barbecue. He used the word barbecue instead of burning the 56th flag and its Confederate battle emblem. Now, the history of this flag, this was not the original Georgia state flag. This was put up as Jim Galloway calls it, a finger to the integration process in the South. So they put the Confederate flag into the Georgia flag. Let us be clear that this was June of 1992. Only a few weeks earlier, Zell Miller, who was the late Zell Miller, had begun his unsuccessful attempt to pull the same flag down. We need to lay the days of segregation to rest and to let bygones be bygones and rest our souls, Miller said. We need to do what is right. A young African-American woman couldn't one up setting a governor over the Confederate symbol, so she wasn't going to have much of a future in politics. And a spokesman for Abrams' campaign on Tuesday noted that the demonstration wasn't just peaceful, but it was properly permitted. This isn't a huge bombshell. Abrams had positioned herself on historic succession as well known last year when she called for the removal of a giant Confederate flag carved into the mountain of Stone, the side of Stone Mountain. Now, Stone Mountain used to be the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan in Georgia. In any case, if you're still pinning for the resurrection of the of a flag that was intended as a middle finger protest against racial integration, it's very likely you weren't going to vote for a African American woman anyway, which isn't to say that the revelation about Abrams is insignificant, because it drives the narrative this year's race for the governor deep into already familiar territory. On Monday, Kemp held a pair of events in suburban Cobb County with Marco Vegas Rubio, the territory that Rubio won in the 2016 presidential primary. That's kind of interesting there. Marco Vegas Rubio, of course, is a Cuban, a Latino, and be interesting what the drive would be there. You see a lot of different machinations here. On Tuesday evening, that was when they appeared at the Atlanta Press Club in Midtown Atlanta at the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Both events were notable exceptions in the GOP schedule. And what you hear will be from the studios of Georgia Public Television. On Wednesday, Kemp reverted to form with a 3-day 20-stop bus tour of small town Georgia. The first destination is Piggly Wiggly in Jeff Davis County. And we've told you time and time again of Abrams' untested strategy for winning on the 6th of November by drawing to the polls thousands of young voters of color, people who normally don't participate. This has been a stratagem that has worked before. When you draw young people, the followers of O.J. Simpson, and they're going to run the same cookie cutter in Florida to a certain extent. Different states are different. Who certainly wouldn't blink at the news that she scored the Confederate symbol 26 years ago on November 7th will tell us whether it worked or not. Meanwhile, Kemp is working from a blueprint that becomes almost standard for statewide Republicans. Yes, so there are some elements in his campaign that were stolen from DJ Trump, who is in his corner, no doubt about that. Where else would DJ Trump go? This playbook was written in 2002. Sonny Perdue, who is now the agricultural secretary under DJ Trump, who became Georgia's first Republican governor by beating the incumbent, who finally done what Zell Miller couldn't do. Roy Barnes had brought down the flag, this 56 flag, in September that year. Perdue and his campaign minions were headquartered in northwest Fulton County, that is Atlanta, Georgia, close to the southern bank of the Chattahoochee River. In that office, Perdue walked me through his plan for making history. He would concede a split with the Democrats in Metro Atlanta, but run up score in rural Georgia. Specifically, he would target 70 counties that had been won by Barnes in 1998, but also voted to re-elect Paul Coverdale, a Republican, on the same ballot. Hey, Coverdale's dead now. None of these counties were in Metro Atlanta. my superiors weren't particularly impressed with Perdue's plan. The piece of his strategy was buried on the back pages with the obituaries, creating the skepticism where the fact that Perdue had anchored his strategy on a segment of the Georgia population, rural European voters, that was slowly disappearing, no doubt about that. But remember, this was in 2002. That would be, 16 years ago. But becomes far easier to unite, especially if one has the right hot buttons to push. We learned this again in November of 2016 when much of Metro Atlanta went blue. But Trump racked up extraordinary numbers in rural Georgia. If you live in Marietta, you are a Republican and you're part of the establishment. You might think you are in the center of the Republican Party, one party veteran would say when the dust settled, but it is a shift under their feet. Yet in 2002, the race proved the foundation then and now. There are other issues, certainly, but it was Barnes' removal of the 56 flag that became visceral, interpreted as a cultural threat by a significant number of European Georgians. Perdue promised, but as governor couldn't deliver on a statewide referendum on the 56th flag and the Confederate emblem. He was too late because part of the problem is Georgia as a whole, particularly Metro Atlanta, is trying to move forward economically. So to move forward economically, you've had African-American mayors there since Maynard Jackson. And this unites African-Americans that have in Atlanta, that's where Dr. King had his pulpit, have become much more bourgeois or middle class, jobs with companies like Delta, Coca-Cola, etc. in that area. Yes, there's poverty in Atlanta, but at the same time, there is quote-unquote hope. So that in itself is a different situation. Don't let the liberal mob run Watkinsville. That was an anonymous flyer came up around the weekend, dominated by a dark image of Stacey Abrams. Vote to say Watkinsville, I'm not sure what that is, a dark image to make Stacey Abrams much more darker than normal. Let me just grab another article here. Let's see, will Trump make a late intervention in Florida? My opinion is perhaps he will, but he really doesn't need to, because the situation is that the seeds are already planted there with his front man, Kemp. Now, we'll go to this leaked audio here of Kemp, and I think we'll just go ahead and do it now, period. The GOP has edge in a $12 million air battle for governor, a lot of money being spent in Georgia. Now, this is where it's a little bit interesting here. This is by Jim Galloway also, and several others. Tamara Halderman here. Anyway, spending on TV ads in Georgia, $12 million there. And IQ media analysis obtained by the Atlanta Constitution shows that GOP-friendly organizations have spent roughly $6.7 million on TV airtime compared to $5.2 million by Democrats, not shabby on either side. On the GOP side, the biggest spenders have been the Republican Party of Georgia, which put $4.4 million behind the gubernatorial candidate Kemp, followed by Kemp's campaign itself, $1.6 million. The National Rifle Association came up with $725,000. The Democratic Party of Georgia for Stacey Abrams, $3.7 million so far. and the pro-Abrams power pack at $900,000. Abrams' campaign has spent $500,000 and the state party another $215 million. On Monday, the National Republican Congressional Committee sent a $1.4 million TV ad on Handel. I'm not sure why they're still spending money on Karen Handel, because Karen Handel is more or less safe. Anyway, has spent $3.7 million in ads backing Lucy Macbeth. I think it's pronounced it that Macbeth in the 6th district against Karen Handel. That's kind of interesting. They were able to do that, so they've sent some more money in. If you remember, Karen Handel had been, of course, the Secretary of State. She lost to Governor Dill, a campaign that we got into it, only prognostication. Anyway, we're told earlier that new NBC News poll, the latest survey, to raise the possibility of a runoff for governor, given the presence of a libertarian there, Ted Metz. He will incidentally be in the debate we're bringing forward here. The same post added, this wrinkle, Governor Dill has served notice that he intends to call the General Assembly to order on the 13th of November to address emergency spending for Hurricane Michael. The session is anticipated to last 5 days, during which the Secretary Kemp, because he is a constitutional officer, would be barred from raising any contributions to a December 4th runoff if it actually happens. Clash over law and order. These are some of the stables between Abrams and Kemp. A day after the debate, the Republican campaign seized on Stacey Abrams' assertion that she helped pass a new crackdown on gang violence. That would have been House Bill 874, an overhaul of the state street crimes law, seen as one of the nation's toughest, and pointed to Abrams' no vote. That, without any doubt, I assure you, Stacey Abrams did not help pass this bill. There's a touchy areas for Abrams, who had been plummeted by Kemp for weeks over her opposition to a new sex offender restriction, because they limited the sentencing discretion of the judge. Points to another proposal, that's Abrams, the Georgia Street and Gang Terrorist and Prevention Act, that earned her support. So from the Crystal Ball gang what do they do? Have significantly shifted the view of the 6th district race that pits Karen Handel against Lucy McBay, moving from likely Republican to lean Republican. No doubt the Sabato group is reacting to NBC's announcement on Monday that it would put the NRRC behind the $1.4 million. So there's some of the things going on out here in the state of Georgia. Still a lot of problems over the voter suppression in the state of Georgia. Let me just move along here, watching the clock here, and see what else we missed here. Well, let me get this in here. Georgia Democrats allege missing absentee ballot applications in DeKalb County. The Democratic parties allege there are 4,700 registered voters in DeKalb County who have submitted absentee ballots, but still have not received a submission. Have submitted absentee ballots, still have not received ballot applications. Have not received their ballots. the election board in that county, DeKalb County, listed approximately 4,700 from the Democratic Party. After reviewing the list of names, there's evidence that the county received only 48 of those voter ballot request forms. All 48 of those forms have been processed. At the same time, there's no evidence there's any missing or lost absentee ballots. It's spoken for the Secretary of State. And see, this is a big problem. Kemp is involved in this. The Secretary of State went to meet DeKalb County. The officials with Kemp's office said they had not found evidence of Democratic Party's claims. At this time, we do not have proof of any missing ballots as from Kemp's office. In past elections, the turnout period from when official ballots received an application was 24 hours. That's correct there. Absentee ballots totals have passed the 2014 mark. By Friday afternoon, DeKalb had received almost 10,000 absentee ballots, according to the data from the county's website. The county received only 7,100 in 2014. To date, more than 62,000 people have voted in DeKalb County this midterm election. So, in other words, it is up all over the county. Will DJ Trump get in a mix? We don't know about that at all. That is one of the stories here. It won't boost total at this time. Let's see. Pearson is a seat of Atkinson County, which gave Trump his biggest margin in 2016. He often does. The Republican contender for governor sticks to state-specific issues and attacks his opponent, of course, Stacey Abrams, an old cookie cutter right there. Vice President Pence is set for 3 stops with Kemp. I'm not certain that will help Kemp. Let's see. I'm trying to stay on the Georgia message. People know both candidates. They know how extreme, he's trying to say extreme there, and how corrupt Kemp is. Anyway, that's kind of one of those little situations, period. And so this is more or less anecdotal information here from Georgia voters. I'm paying attention more now than I did in the past. I can't avoid it now. That's Melissa Boylan, I suppose is how she pronounces her name. Georgia Democrats are weary of turning the election to a referendum on Trump. Very good advice there. They should stay out of the Trump territory. Now, we'll finish this up with the Rolling Stone leaked audio. This is from Kemp. Expressed concern over Georgians exercising their right to vote. He's the Secretary of State there. Voter turnout operation continues to concern me, especially if everyone uses and exercises their right to vote. This was obtained by Rolling Stone, an attendee of the Georgia Professionals for Kemp event. It said they recorded the 21 minutes and 12 seconds of the event held last Friday in at the Blind Pig Parlor Bar near Atlanta's Buckhead neighborhood. That's the same neighborhood that a candidate for mayor, I can't remember her name right now, she lost anyway. Not long after Kemp's remarks, the candidate expressed a worry about early voting and the literally tens of thousands of dollars that the Abrams camp are putting into early voting. Early voting has always been a stay of Democrat and African American voters. They have just an unprecedented number of that, he said, which permits is unprecedented number of that, he said, which is something that continues to concern us, especially if everyone exercises their right to vote, which they absolutely can, and mail those ballots in. we have got to have a heavy turnout. He's also talking a turnout. His recent decision to suspend 53,000 voter applications, 70% of which were filed by African Americans, for violating the state exact match law. I think we talked about this on Friday Jobber. Verification standards have drawn attention to his passion for restrictive voter laws and purging votes. American public media reported last week that Kemp purged an estimated 107,000 voters last year simply because they didn't vote in the prior election. So in other words, these tricks have caused a lot of problems out here. And I'll see if we can get some of this recording up here. I don't know if we can. Perhaps we can't, but we'll try. If not, we'll get it on. This is from the Rolling Stone magazine. And for some reason, we're not being able to get it. Anyway, we'll have to get back to this. We'll try to play it on, not Friday Job, on the week that was, which will be on Saturday morning. This will do it for our part of it. We'll go on to the debate that was held at the studios of Georgia Public TV on the 23rd of October. We'll see you on the week that was on Saturday morning. Boston Red out of here. Good day.
Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting right here in Atlanta. This is the debate among candidates for governor of Georgia. So let's meet the candidates right now. They are in alphabetical order. First, Stacey Abrams, a Democrat, is the first woman to lead either party in the Georgia General Assembly and the first African American to lead Georgia's House of Representatives. Brian Kemp, a Republican, has served as Georgia's Secretary of State since 2010. And Ted Metz, a Libertarian, is retired from a career as an insurance and financial professional. Welcome to you all. Now, the time has come to meet our panelists. First, we have Greg Blumenstein, a political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, followed by Elwyn Lopez. She is a reporter at 11 Alive TV here in Atlanta. And Frank Malloy is an anchor at WMAZ-TV in Macon, Georgia. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's get started. For rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. Next, here we go. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked 2 questions. Frank Malloy, you get the first question to Ted Metz.
All right. Mr. Metz, welcome. You propose eliminating the state income and property tax and boosting the sales tax to try and make up that revenue. How do you sell that to low-income people on fixed incomes?
It's really easy because we have electronic systems where we can issue a card that would actually use as a discount on the taxation right at the checkout counter. It's simple.
Ellen Lopez, you get the next question for Stacey Abrams.
Ms. Abrams, you participated in a 1992 protest where you burned the state flag. Do you stand by those actions? And what message do you have to people who are concerned that you burned a state symbol even though it had a Confederate emblem?
Well, first, I want to say thank you to the Atlanta Press Club for having me. And I want to say that I'm a very proud Georgian. I graduated from our public high schools. I went to Spelman College here in Atlanta. I left for graduate school and law school, but came back as soon as I could. I came back because I wanted to help build my state, make it a stronger place. And 26 years ago, as a college freshman, I, along with many other Georgians, including the governor of Georgia, were deeply disturbed by the racial divisiveness that was embedded in the state flag with that Confederate symbol. I took an action of peaceful protest. I said that that was wrong. And 10 years later, my opponent, Brian Kemp, actually voted to remove that symbol. What I'm fighting for now, though, is more of Georgia values, making sure that we expand Medicaid so everyone has access to health insurance, ensuring that all of our children get educated at strong schools that understand their needs, and making certain that we create good, prosperous jobs across the state of Georgia, all 159 counties. That would That's what I want to do because I'm proud of Georgia and proud to be a Georgian.
Thank you. Moving on. Greg Bluestein, please ask a question of Mr. Kemp.
Yes, Secretary Kemp, Ms. Abrams and her allies have repeatedly called on you to resign as the state's top elections official. You've rejected those calls. I've got a two-part question for you. One, do you believe you can impartially oversee the state's elections while also running for governor? And two, your office is required by law to direct a recount. Would you recuse yourself if a recount is necessary?
Well, thank you so much for having me this evening, and I appreciate that question. I took an oath of office to serve as Secretary of State, and that's exactly what I'm going to continue to do. Is anyone that knows about elections in Georgia, it's our county elections officials that are actually holding the election, which is going on right now and will be on Election Day. Their local bipartisan election boards tally the votes in the election. They're certified at the local level and then hand-delivered to our office. So I'm doing the exact same thing that Democrat Kathy Cox was doing when she was running for governor. You know, if we have the instance of a recount, that's automatic by state law. If lower than 1%, that, again, is something that the counties do. And we got a very competent elections team to oversee that process, and I'm certain that there would be a lot of people watching that. And I have staked my integrity of my whole career on the duty that I have as Secretary of State. I've always fulfilled and followed the laws of our state, and I'll continue to do that through the tenure of my service to this great state. Thank you.
Mr. Kemp, thank you for that opening remarks there. Greg Bluestein, we go back to you to ask Ted Metz a question.
Yeah, Mr. Metz, you've promised to cut spending by slashing what you call obsolete, inefficient, unnecessary, and unconstitutional agencies. What specifically would you eliminate? And what do you say to Georgians who might depend on their services?
Farmers to grow a crop that can give them a cash crop that actually is something that's important, that can save the environment, that can save the soil, et cetera, is the first step to prove to the farmers in rural Georgia that we care about them. The other thing is we can do all sorts of things with farm-to-table distribution systems. We got 7 counties in Georgia that don't even have a grocery store. You know, the thing is we need to be encouraging our agriculture and getting them to actually grow food rather than just the big cash crops, the monocultures that they're doing, which is destroying the cropland. Another thing that we can do for rural Georgia is actually do a rural broadband based on long-range Wi-Fi. It's cheap, it's simple, it can be co-located with the cell phone towers. We can also allow nurses and practitioners to write prescriptions, and we can also use telemedicine to make rural Georgians get better health care. And that's about all I have to say for that.
Thank you, and you were right on time. We appreciate that very much. Elwyn Lopez, you get the next question.
Ms. Abrams, 75% of Georgia voters favor expanding Medicaid. That's according to an AJC poll from January. You said that you want to expand the program on day one. How likely is that with a Republican state legislature? And how would you be able to achieve that on day one or even during your first year in office?
So what I've said is that my day one priority is expansion of Medicaid. I've been through 11 legislative sessions. I know it takes a little bit longer than one day. But I will say this, having worked across the aisle, having worked with Democrats and Republicans, I know that we all care about Georgia families. It's one of our core values. And I know that we do not want to see more rural hospitals close. Unfortunately, there is only one solution in the state of Georgia. And despite the misleading information from my opponent, I am not promoting anything other than a program that has been proven to be bipartisan. Governor Mike Pence expanded Medicaid. We know that it works. We know that it is a bipartisan solution that will help cover 500,000 Georgians, will create 56,000 jobs, will cost us approximately $250 million, will draw down $3 billion, and will help stabilize the rural economies. There is no other solution. Now, my opponent is going to say something about innovation waivers, but the reality is that those innovation waivers are shoddy plans that have been dismissed by most states and will allow pre-existing conditions to once again not be covered in the state of Georgia.
Thank you so much. Greg, you have the next question.
Secretary Kemp, this is kind of a follow-up. Your $600 million teacher pay raise proposal would account for more than 2/3 of the state's typical revenue growth. So where do you cut or raise new revenue to make that a reality?
Well, I'm really proud of my education plan, giving teachers a pay raise, investing in public education, a robust school safety plan. I can assure you that us providing a school counselor in every high school to deal with behavioral health issues, giving one-time grants of $30,000 to our local schools, every public school in the state, to secure our schools and keep our children safe. Nothing is more important than that to me than that, being a father of 3 teenage daughters. But look, we have all this accounted for. Unlike my opponent, who wants to take the same bucket of money that's out there through revenue and growth and give it to several different pots, we're only offering it to what we can afford. That's why I have a spending cap proposal so that we can lower taxes next year, also pay for our school teacher pay raise plan and our school safety plan, and we've accumulated and accounted for that in the budget through natural growth that we've had in this great economy.
In an effort to quickly tackle some of the other important issues to Georgia, I'd like to give the other two candidates 20 seconds to respond to the issue of education. What's important to each of you in terms of reforming education for our state? Mr. Metz, we'll begin with you.
Well, to begin with, we have an overload of administrators. We've got about 10,000 administrators, 110,000 teachers, and 1.7 million students. We can reduce the number of administrators and then actually take the teachers to start teaching to the student rather than teaching to a test.
Thank you so much. Ms. Abrams, 20 seconds on your education plan.
I would invest in early childhood education, expanding access, especially in our rural communities. I would make certain that we fully fund our K through 12 formula, including wraparound services so that children don't come to school hungry or in need of mental health. And I would make certain that our teachers not only get a pay raise, but that we actually protect their retirement. I intend not to be an education governor, but the public education governor. And we can pay for this in part by repealing the private vouchers that are currently draining $100 million from our budget.
Thank you so much. With 2 minutes left in this debate, quickly give me your views, 20 seconds each of you, on criminal justice reform. Mr. Metz.
I think my day one of being the governor would be to issue a proclamation to stop police and law enforcement from arresting people for possession of small amounts of cannabis for the personal consumption. That would unclog the court system. It would reduce the fear in the youth that would cause them to shoot a police officer for fear of being arrested. Furthermore, we also need to go through and teach our jurors how to be a good juror by acquitting people of a crime that has no victim. We can unclog the court system, and that's a great best thing I can do.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. Mr. Kemp, 20 seconds, please.
I certainly support the good work of Governor Deal and the legislature on criminal justice reform. I think in the future, though, our next step is to have robust public safety reform, which includes my two plans to stop and dismantle gangs and to go after drug cartels. There is not a more important issue to myself or my wife, Marty, and the father of 3 teenage daughters than to keep our families safe, and that is exactly what I will do as your governor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kemp. Ms. Abrams, 20 seconds, please.
We have done great work under Governor Nathan Deal on criminal justice reform, but we're not done yet. We need to decriminalize being poor in the state of Georgia. That means decriminalizing certain traffic offenses. We need to make certain that we lower the age at which a juvenile can be treated, raise an age at which a juvenile can be treated as an adult. But we also have to do the work of transition. Those who are coming out of our prisons and going back into our communities need the supports of housing and access to jobs. And we have to have stronger public safety and community safety. That's why I want to make certain that our local law enforcement, those county sheriffs, have access to the funding that they need to take care of their families.
In fairness, I have to interrupt. One final question tonight from Mr. Boonstein.
And this is a yes-no question because we're short on time. Governor Deal just today announced a special session after the election designed to provide more hurricane relief, but lawmakers will also get the chance to make permanent a jet fuel tax break for Delta and other air carriers. Yes or no, would you support that tax break? Mr. Metz, you first. Sorry.
No.
Mr. Kemp?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, time comes for closing statements from each of our candidates. Stacey Abrams, you get the first closing statement this evening.
Well, I want to thank Georgians for tuning in and listening to this conversation. There's a lot of disagreement about who we are, but there is no disagreement in my mind about where we need to go. This is a state that needs to move forward, that needs to recognize that we all deserve to live in a place where everyone has the freedom and the opportunity to thrive. I'm the only candidate not only with a strong record of bipartisan leadership, but with clear, comprehensive, specific plans about what we do next. Educating our children from cradle to career, investing in our small businesses, especially those that can't access bank loans, making sure that we are creating new jobs through advanced energy, that we're strengthening our agricultural sector and our hospitality sector, but that we're bringing new jobs, that we are supporting our local law enforcement by making sure that those who are protecting us with their lives can put food on their tables. And we have to expand Medicaid. That's creating 500,000 new jobs. That's putting money into communities. I've learned the values of family, faith, service, and responsibility from my parents, and those are the values I will take when I lead Georgia, and I humbly ask for your vote.
Ms. Abrams, thank you so much. Ted Metz, please give us your closing statement.
Thank you. I am here before you to ask for your vote. This is going to be a runoff anyway. If you're tired of the two-party system and the two-party tyranny of the oligarchs running the planet, then a vote for me is a protest vote to show them that you're sick and tired of the same old stuff. Basically, being a libertarian is leave me alone, don't tell me what to do, and don't steal my stuff. I'm running to end corruption, also to hold government accountable, and to lower taxes. There's lots of ways to do that by stuffing government back inside of its constitutional constraints. Many people have forgotten that the Constitution is about holding government accountable to a small group of functions, which include an equal playing field, making sure that everyone has equal protection under the law, as well as providing protection for our property and for our happiness. And we don't get that out of government anymore. Government is in everything that we do, and everything that we do has to have permission from government. It's time to stop.
Mr. Metz, thank you. Brian Kipp, it is your turn.
This election is a fight for our future. My opponent has run the most dishonest campaign Georgians have ever seen, and here's why. She's lying about my record to hide her extreme agenda. She wants higher taxes, bigger government, a single-payer, radical government takeover of health care, and those are her moderate positions. She also wants to give taxpayer benefits, welfare, and free college tuition to those here illegally. And she's even asking illegals to vote for her in this race. Not even California is that liberal. But with your vote, you can end this craziness. And as governor, I'll invest in public education and give teachers a raise. I'll cut taxes and lower health care costs. And I'll continue to streamline government. Fight for our conservative values, including our Second Amendment. Protect the Hope Scholarship and keep our classrooms safe for our children. This race is about the soul of our future, and I'd be honored to have your vote.
Thank you to all of you. You can exhale now. We got through the hour. Everyone give yourselves a round of applause. That concludes our debate. We like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday.
Why is it not the governor's responsibility to ensure that law enforcement officers protecting our state are paid a living wage?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm glad to respond to it. The state government has responded under Governor Deal's leadership, and I'm proud to have his support in this campaign. He has increased state patrol pay, other state law enforcement folks, including individuals in the Secretary of State's office, and that is the duty of the state, not of the county government. Unlike my opponent, who has using the same pot of money to pay everybody everything, your taxes will go up $13,000 per person to pay for that. That is irresponsible, and as governor, I wouldn't take part in that, and that is why I've got a plan to implement a spending cap so we can continue to have low taxes and have good paying jobs in our state. That is what will increase pay at the county level and for local law enforcement.
Ms. Abrams, would you like to respond?
Once again, my opponent, Mr. Kemp, is being misleading and using cherry-picked information. Local law enforcement does indeed hold responsibility. It's our county sheriffs that are pulling over these folks in rural counties. It's our local police officers who are on food stamps because they don't have access to what they need. And no one in the state is more outraged by drug trafficking than I am. My younger brother fights daily an addiction that is fed by these traffickers. But I will never ask law enforcement to do something without standing with them and making sure they can put food on their tables while we ask them to protect our families.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams. We now go back to Mr. Kemp to ask Stacey Abrams a question.
Well, Ms. Abrams, as you know, in a recent video, you called on illegals to vote for you in this election. I was actually shocked. I had to watch that video twice. It clearly shows that you were asking for undocumented and documented folks to be part of your winning strategy. So my question is, why are you encouraging people to break the law for you in this election?
Mr. Kemp, you are very aware that I know the laws of Georgia when it comes to voting. In fact, I am one of the foremost experts in the state on expansion of voting rights. And I have never in my life asked for anyone who is not legally eligible to vote to be able to cast a ballot. What I've asked for is that you allow those who are legally eligible to vote to allow them to cast their ballots. And in fact, we took you to court in 2016, and a federal judge said that you illegally canceled 34,000 registrations. You use the exact same system, the exact match system that is under dispute right now. Now, I realize that in the next response, you're going to say that it's a function of my organization because your tendency is to blame everyone else for the mistakes that you make. My responsibility as a leader is to see a problem and try to solve it. When I saw that we had 800,000 unregistered people of color in the state of Georgia, I started an organization that has reached into every county and increased those registrations. When I saw that people were being unlawfully denied the right to vote, I worked to make certain that we held you accountable. And as the next governor of Georgia, I will continue to do my job to make certain that every legally eligible vote that gets cast gets counted.
Ms. Abrams, thank you. Mr. Kemp, would you like to respond?
Well, thankfully, the truth here is very simple. Georgians should simply Google the clip, watch what she says. You'll know that she's talking about this election and talking about illegals voting for her in this election. They filed a lawsuit to do that, which she mentioned, but even the ICE enforcement director under the Obama administration said that she should drop out of this race because of encouraging illegals to vote in this election. That is outrageous. She knows that that is criminal. If you watch the videos yourself, you will see it firsthand.
Mr. Metz, would you like to weigh in here, out of all fairness?
Well, out of all fairness, I would like to say that, Stacey Abrams takes money from donors for the third sector development and the New Georgia Project to do a function that essentially anyone else could do, and the people themselves could go online to register to vote. They could get a ride to go and register to vote. But the thing is, she also uses that influence with other 501c3 organizations to actually do phone banking and voter drives, really, and specifically for her campaign. And that's a violation of 501c3 charters.
Excuse me, I have to end your thought there. Ms. Abrams, would you like to respond?
Unfortunately, my opponent, Mr. Metz, is very confused about what is at stake. My campaign, the Abrams for Georgia campaign, operates as a separate organization. I am no longer responsible for or involved in the New Georgia Project. I have never failed to meet my responsibilities as a tax attorney with a specialty in tax-exempt organization law. I have very carefully followed the law and ensured that we never cross any lines and we only work for the public good. I'm running for governor because I recognize that that public good has to happen with public and private partnerships. And I've worked hard to make certain that the nonprofit sector, the public sector, and the private sector have worked to make Georgia stronger for all.
You're out of time. Would you like to end the round with a rebuttal, Mr. Kemp?
Well, I think I've already rebutted the question I asked her. I don't believe.
Moving on to Ted Metz, then. Please ask your question of Brian Kemp.
Okay, Mr. Kemp, an independent watchdog group has documented over 10 serious ethical concerns against Representative Abrams, and they filed 2 ethics complaints. These include issues such as using campaign resources to sell her books for personal profit, reimbursing herself $84,000 in campaign funds without disclosing where the money went, and inaccurate financial disclosures. Should someone of that ethical qualification really be elected as governor?
Well, I certainly share your concerns on the things that you mentioned. I appreciate that question. I would say what's more concerning is Ms. Abrams being a tax attorney, is her not paying her taxes while she took the opportunity to loan her campaign $50,000 instead of doing that. I don't think I could get away with that. I don't think Mr. Metz could get away with that, and the people of Georgia couldn't get away with that. And when you're putting politics over paying the government the taxes you owe, I think that does make you unfit to be governor. And that's why even in tough times, battling through a recession and investing in a tough business deal where the company owes someone some money, My wife and I have always paid our taxes. That's what we do as Georgians, and that's the kind of governor I'll be that will stand with integrity and the people of this state to honor the good money that they're sending us, to spend it wisely, budget conservatively, to cut taxes in the future, not raise them like Ms. Abrams.
Let's give Ms. Abrams a chance to respond.
Once again, my opponents are being very misleading. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit my family. My parents lost their church, and they lost most of their income. I stepped up and became their primary source of income. And for the last 15 years, I have taken responsibility for my parents. In 2015 and 2016, my parents faced health challenges, and my father had to have cancer treatment. You can defer tax payments. You cannot defer cancer treatment. You cannot defer responsibility for your family. I never failed to pay my bills. I pay the IRS. We have a
Ms.
payment
Abrams,
plan, and that is wrong to say that I'm doing anything else.
Mr. Metz, your rebuttal.
Well, an independent watchdog group and reliable news sources that you can look up have documented at least 10 ethical concerns against you, Mr. Kemp. You used official Secretary of State website and mobile app to promote your campaign website. You reneged on your $700,000 loan and your personal guarantee, and you're being sued over it. And there's probably 13 other lawsuits that you're currently being named in. If you won't pay what you're, you won't pay even though your net worth is many times more than the amount that you owe. And those 10 ethical violations
Mr. Metz,
should also
ask your question.
disqualify you.
Well, I think that was his
would you
rebuttal.
like to respond?
Well, I think that was his
That
rebuttal.
was my rebuttal.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Mr.
I would
Kemp,
like.
would you like
I
to
would like to
respond?
respond. That's absolutely ridiculous. The many things he said. I've had a great track record of being in the private sector for 30 years. I've had the opportunity to serve in the legislature with distinction, even working with Mrs. Abrams, and she knows that full well. We've got a great record in the Secretary of State's office. Despite the mistruths that have been spoken tonight, we have more people on the rolls. I created online voter registration in our state where you can register to vote 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, something Ms. Abrams voted against.
Thank you so much. Finally, Ms. Abrams, you get the final question in this round. Please address Ted Metz.
Mr. Metz, do you believe it is hypocritical that Mr. Kemp borrowed $500,000 from a friend and refused to pay it back, that he actually loaned his campaign in 2006 $50,000 while he was $1 million in debt, and that he continues to guarantee loans that are twice the amount of his net worth? Do you think it's hypocritical for him to attack anyone else when he is in the same position?
It is hypocritical, and it's also hypocritical to be in government to promote yourself, to be self-aggrandizing and self-enriching, and nobody gets rich in politics unless they're a crook, according to Harry Truman. It seems like we have a lot of issues in government where people are using their positions to get rich and enrich their friends, and that's got to stop.
Ms. Abrams, would you like to?
I think that Mr. Kemp has unfortunately created a narrative that is incomplete and inaccurate. He loaned his campaign $50,000 in 2006 when he was $1 million in debt. 91 times he told the courts that he does not owe $500,000 that he clearly owes. And this is someone who takes credit for more people registering to vote, despite the fact that he purges voters at a regular interval. We have more people in Georgia. That's why we have more voters. And I voted against the voter registration, the online registration system, because the Republicans were trying to hide judicial elections, and I thought that was unfair and wrong.
Thank you. Mr.
Well, I'd like
Kemp,
to
you are
respond,
going to end this round with your rebuttal.
I have paid my taxes when they were due, unlike Mrs. Abrams, in some very tough times. The company owes the individual on the loan, not me. I haven't been that was a company debt, not mine personally. It was an investment I made. I own 8% of that company. After 30 years in business and fighting through the recession, I'm proud of that record. No one has made it easier to vote and harder to cheat in our state. And it's really outrageous that while we're talking about all these voting issues on both of these folks up here, I've actually taken the lead on these issues. We're having record turnout right now.
Thank you. You are out of time. I told you this round was going to be a little tougher. That concludes our second round. For those of you just joining us, this is a debate between candidates for governor of Georgia, and we want to thank you so much for joining us. We will now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidates of his or her choice until we run